Welcome, Hoboken by Impastato. That's me, and Einstein. That's this guy. We're back for another episode of our weekly podcast right before Thanksgiving. Really honored and a great opportunity. We're going to have Ron Bautista on tonight to talk about everything Hoboken, a guy that ran for mayor, a guy that's an activist for pedestrian safety, for Bike Hoboken, all about protecting bike lanes and making it safe for every age, whether you're 8 years old or you're 80, to cross our mile square. So really excited about him.
Right. It's going to be a fun discussion. Despite the fact that he's a bicycle supremacist, I think it's going to be really interesting. I know we all have different perspectives. It's going to be a weird dynamic. You and I have different perspectives, and I think he'll bring a fresh take to it.
Yeah, definitely. So we're pumped about that. We're excited to have our first guest on the show, on the podcast here, Mr. Ron Bautista. I want to get right into it, let him introduce himself, and then we'll try to juggle some hot topics here in Hoboken. Ron, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. It's great to have your invitation to discuss many topics. So I was not born and raised in Hoboken, but I've been living in Hoboken for the past 20 years. I did graduate from Hoboken High School. I've been living in Hoboken now, first on Monroe Street, then on 4th and Jackson, then on 4th and Grand. So I've lived a bit more on the southwest side of Hoboken. I'm an activist. I've been an advocate for pedestrian safety, for better transit, even recently in the past 2 years for community land trusts, for affordability and housing. I'm here to discuss any matters that you want to chat about.
Cool, man. Great to have you. Also ran for mayor.
Yes.
2016?
2017.
17. And then, same race. Josh and I both ran.
Yeah.
Ron ran for mayor. Josh ran for city councilman. I ran for city councilman at large, as well as Josh. So we're
and I ran for city council in this past race,
and just completed a hot race in the third
ward,
versus Mr. Russo, which is always hard to beat.
Tell me about it.
So we're great to have you here. Welcome. So we chop it up every week. Josh and I, we talk about some topics in Hoboken. Mainly, this podcast is about business, local issues. It's not just a political thing. We don't want to just talk about politics. But one of the main issues and one of the main talking points right now are protected bike lanes, bike safety. Our scooter program just ended last week, whether you're pro or against it. So we do want to have you on. You're an activist with local pedestrian safety, and you are part of Bike Hoboken. Love to hear your ideas and also your comments on protected bike lanes and bike safety. Did you like the scooter program and how everything kind of comes together?
Yeah, well, first is the priority has to be the pedestrian. That has to be number one, and then everything else comes, second really. And pedestrian safety comes in with very specific measures that we have to do on our streets. It's something that has been engineered throughout the past, decades, not just here in Hoboken, but elsewhere, and it's something that we've been trying to implement. For protected bike lanes, I have been an advocate for it because it has been proven to get riders off the sidewalk, help improve pedestrian safety itself, because by the streets getting more narrow, up to 11 feet, that helps so that drivers don't go too fast because drivers are more careful. With pedestrian safety, there are different measures. There's the street bump outs that help cars so that they make the full turn. It makes it narrow, so that the crossing from one corner to the other, the crossing times is shorter, so that people from all ages can cross the street a lot faster and get to safety a lot faster. So these are things that it was not just invented, it was not just implemented in Hoboken, and it's something that we would like to implement it here with the advice and the top conversations from the engineers.
So the bump outs, I guess we could start there, right? Sure. Josh, are you pro bump outs? Do you think it's good for the city? Do you think it's a waste of money? Do you think...
I think it's a waste of money. I think if we look at some places where they've done the bump out, it's the curve of the sidewalk ends, another curve starts, and there's a bump out. And when we have a heavy winter, like Farmer's Almanac says we're going to have this winter, that area is going to get covered with snow, somebody's foot's going to go down, they're going to fall, and they're going to twist their ankle, potentially break something. And I don't think there was this sort of avalanche of danger in the history of Hoboken until these curb bump outs. And there's a lot of places where people say, you know, it makes the turn hard and you can see the tire marks on the bump out sidewalk. So I think a lot of these issues that you brought up could be solved with better and more enforcement. Maybe it means we need more cops. Maybe it means we need more, what's it called, meter maids. I can't remember the current term, whatever they're called.
Enforcement.
Traffic enforcement, whatever it's called, that aren't police. But I think you still have some of the fundamental problems as evidenced by tire marks on lots of the bump outs. And as for bicycle riders on the sidewalk, especially if they're children, regardless of whether it's a protected bike lane by like a dinky piece of plastic, I don't remember what it's called. Ballard, yeah. I'd rather have them, especially the children, on the sidewalk, annoying me as a pedestrian, than, God forbid, anywhere near cars.
Well, right now, cars haven't even gotten into the sidewalks. So even the sidewalks are not fully the safe haven that we could have. Now, talking about the snow and the accumulation, that already happens. Right now, when it accumulates, where do they push the snow at? They push it to the corners. They push it right next to the crossing. Actually, people with disabilities have told me throughout the campaign that they have issues and they need more handicapped parking spots throughout the city because, you know, for example, if they have their business, they have one on a liquor store, Oggies, and between 4th and 5th and Adams. He doesn't live in Hoboken, but he owns the business in Hoboken. He needs to park somewhere near his place because if he parks in the parking garage, he has to travel through those, impediments of the snow accumulated at the corners.
The only handicap spot is one deeded around the corner.
Or it's the one that is reserved for specific people. So that's what we need more that are open to other users besides that. But talking about the bump outs, right now it's you said there was no major danger up to this point.
You said there was no avalanche.
There's no like. There's no crisis.
So I'll give you an example. So on 5th and Washington, there was a senior citizen that was hit and killed, actually just a year before the protected bike lanes was debated. And the protected bike lanes and the bump outs, so the whole redesign for Washington Street was debated. So something that somebody brought up is like, when was the last time somebody got killed on Washington Street? I said, well, it's like a year ago, not even. And one of the things that happened was that the car was doing a very sharp turn on 5th, and that's when they hit the lady. Besides that, not too long ago, actually about a year ago, there was a senior citizen that also got hit on 1st and Washington, and when we asked the chief of police what happened, he said that actually the senior citizen was okay right away because the car had gone in a turn in a slow way. Now, I'm not saying specifically it was the bump outs, but I am saying that there's a difference that makes. It's something that is proven that it does slow down the cars at the corner. You just said it yourself, people are like, they don't feel comfortable making the turns. They feel like it's harder to make the turns at the bump out.
A lot of these bump outs, you can see tire marks from people that went on the bump out making the turn. And like, I've seen accidents happen in front of Washington Street when someone, for some reason, decided to put their foot on the gas when at a red light.
Mm-hmm. So accidents are things are gonna happen.
Yeah, I saw there was a skateboarder who was crossing at the right time, just got plowed into, and thankfully was relatively okay, enough to walk it off and sit down and call the ambulance. And a whole bunch of people rushed over to make sure that he was okay, and the guy that hit him pulled over and went over, and he clearly just wasn't paying. He clearly just spaced out while he was driving. But accidents happen. I'm not relishing the fact, but for example, in Elizabeth, just 2 or 3 days ago, with their recent scooter rollout, the e-scooters, same as we had here, Lime, 16-year-old high school student was hit and killed by a truck. So if even when we roll out new technologies or new methodologies, this idea, I'm not saying that you're saying this, but that comes from the mayor's office, that I call it the zero vision.
That's what they call it.
Well, they call it Vision Zero.
Oh, right.
I'm making fun of them because no one wants anyone to die, right? But they're like, that's our moral high ground, right? Like anyone can disagree with that. No, it's a complete lack of vision. But their zero vision plan, says, with all these new things, bump outs and protected bike lanes and scooters will invoke Captain Planet and save the environment, and will make sure no one ever dies.
Yeah.
And you have to be high to believe that that's plausible.
Well, you also have to, and you're in a business, right? So you have to set your goals, right, in order for you to meet them. And with the zero deaths and zero, it's actually critical injury. So it's not just any injury, right? It can happen based on the measures that we could do, right? I mean, you mentioned the accident in Elizabeth, right? The crash in Elizabeth. The truck was turning and it hit the 16-year-old on a scooter. That big issue is that kid could have been on a bike. That issue is that because there is just a street that's just wide enough, and they make that turn because there's nothing on the side because they're not even used to it. Sometimes, listen, I'm not a big fan of the striped bike lanes because they're not enough. They're not protected, right? I wouldn't have my kid. I would feel even nervous biking with my kid on those. But when you have them protected, either by cars, so you shift the parking more in without taking any parking away, by having them next to the curb, that already helps. That protects that rider. So those are things that we could do that could potentially help. Listen, just today, I don't know if you found out this morning, 79-year-old woman biking in the division between Union City and Jersey City got hit and killed. And it was also a truck that was making a turn. But it's a busy street, and sometimes we say, hey, people shouldn't bike on Washington Street. People shouldn't bike on the busy street. But there's a reason why it's a busy street. There's a reason why you need to drive there, because it's the access that you have. There's a reason why I need to bike through there, because it's the way that I have to take in order to get to a certain point. Yeah, we do take some preferences based on safety, but like you said, people are not perfect, right? So if people are not perfect, then we can't legislate on people being perfect or people being afraid of enforcement, right? Like, oh, there's a cop in every corner, I'm going to watch out. That doesn't really happen. One, that's not going to happen in terms of enforcement. Not saying that you said that. But also, people don't fully react in a responsible way that we would say they're going to follow the rules because they know there's enforcement around. It has to be a combination. There has to be enforcement. But there also has to be the engineering. If we can have all the different components and put them together and then try to get to that goal, then why not do it? Why not try it?
Yeah, but I really feel like in the city right now, there's like two sides. It's cars, and then there's everyone against cars. And the people that are anti-cars are pro bikes, pro scooters, pro bump outs, and all those mechanisms, right? And then you have all these people that drive cars that don't understand why people don't get why they drive cars. So I'm not against bikes. I had a bike, it got stolen, right? I bought another bike, it got stolen. That's my fault.
And then you bought a car.
By the way, I'm not against bikes. I'm not against bike lanes. Bike lanes, protected bike lanes, in my opinion, are extremely safe. I would love to see them if it makes sense. If there's room for it in the city, which I don't.
And that's a big if.
Right.
And also, listen, I hear you, and I always.
But why?
Whenever I speak about protected bike lanes and traffic and parking, I never say, listen, there shouldn't be cars in Hoboken. I never say that.
I do think to a lot of people in your camp.
And you could say that the movement is towards anti-car, but every policy that I'm pushing forward is so that there's a balance. Because right now, if you see the street, 80 to 70% or 70% of the street is for the individual car.
Right.
You know, even when there's a bike lane because it's striped, then there's double parking, and I know you don't like double parking either. I've seen your tweets. You know, even then, it's not, about 70% of the street is just for the individual car. It's just allocating some more percentage. I mean, the reason why the city council started talking about protected bike lanes recently was because they felt the pressure of a program that was very popular, the scooter program, in terms of the users. Not that meaning that everybody agreed with it.
Right,
I loved it.
Both.
I also had my reservations, but yeah. So they were like, "Crap, if people really like it." They just had the survey come out that said 70% of the riders.
Well, the survey was more like a push poll. I don't know if you actually filled it out or not.
How many?
But it was so.
How many surveys I not push?
All the questions were so slanted. It was like, do you like scooters? How much do you like scooters?
Most
do you like them 9 out of 10? Do you like them 8 out of 10? All the way at the bottom was like, you don't like the program.
You can argue about the methodology.
Well, you're right. That's why the conversation.
But the conversation started because they felt that okay, we have to do something because there is a safety issue, especially for pedestrians, and they knew that protected bike lanes could help. But they also had to push back. So when you don't have that sense of, no, we're going to make these measures because that makes sense and that's actually the right thing to do, then we come into these issues that we don't do either or, and then everybody's upset.
See, the way I see it is there was a special interest, a group of, which to me is not a negative term, but there was a group of Hoboken citizens that in the Washington Street redesign began, or when that conversation first started, began pushing for concrete protected bike lane on Washington Street. And they had desires for that to be the first one, and then for it to expand to other places. They failed on that in terms of having a protected bike lane. So then the politicians went out in search of a solution for a problem that didn't yet exist. And they added the scooters to the scenario. They got everyone hooked on scooters like it's, people on crystal meth. And then they're like, oh, now we need protected bike lanes. Did you not remember when you rejected this on Washington Street before? Now we really need it because we added the equivalent of several thousand people getting electric scooters, which would have never happened. Sure, like electric scooters, they gained popularity. Maybe a couple hundred people in town who got them, but the equivalent of several thousand people owning electric scooters would have never happened if not for this strange chimera of corporate socialism that exists between Lyme and municipalities.
How is that corporate socialism?
Don't get me going.
Because the city doesn't pay them, do you?
If I'm a scooter producer, then I
haven't been in this conversation, so I'm
trying to warn you.
I have a car. I don't ride a bike.
Or when you walk and they tell you
just
walk on 4th and Washington.
Using the slowest form of transportation, my legs.
Sure.
All right. I can say that we have insane drivers that don't stop at any stop signs. And in general, I don't think it's okay to make generalizations, but I'm okay with this one.
Keep going.
I
know where you're going.
Right. We have bicyclists that calmed down a bit once the scooters came out because I think the insane bicyclists all were like, awesome, a new toy.
But you still have those rogue teenagers that are going the wrong way down the street on a bike.
But
which make it worse for everybody else.
I feel like a little bit less because they all, illegally got on the scooter somehow, right? And then you have a ton of scooterists, the most of which weren't doing anything wrong, but a fair amount were just driving like maniacs. And I would even say maybe 30% of all scooterists that I saw had no regard for whether or not they had a stop sign or a red light. I'm like, the red lights, okay, at least the cars usually stop at them. The stop signs, 50-50 chance whether or not they're going to stop. But the scooterists, a ton of them, just like, oh, red light, that's a suggestion. Let me look to see if there's traffic.
Listen, I could tell you I'm the first one to get really upset whenever I would see either a person on a bike or a person on a scooter that runs a red light or runs a stop sign. I'm the first one to get pissed. I'm the first one that tweeted about about the Ojo scooter when they hit, the woman with the stroller. You have a baby, I have a baby. Yeah. We have wives. I understand, and we have to be empathetic with that. And it was the wrong type of scooter. But what you were saying, it's very true that. In order to, I always say, in order to be a jerk, you have to be a person first. Then you're a jerk on a car, walking, biking, scooter, whatever you want to do. The issue is when we just think that it's an enforcement issue only. It has to be accompanied with the infrastructure that will limit people on breaking those rules, if you will, right?
But everyone that's ever seen a truck turn off Washington Street has seen them go over the curb bump out. It doesn't stop.
And I have also seen
the infrastructure that you're creating.
I've also seen the trucks make the turn and not hit.
But to your point, you're saying if a person on a bike is going the wrong way down the street,
sure,
that's because there's not infrastructure or a bike lane for them to go into? Or if a cyclist doesn't stop at a stop sign, that's because there's not a protected bike lane on that road?
No, and so here's the thing. When the whole thing with the bump outs, the thing that's being tried to do, the effect that has been tried to do, is similar to when you go to pay the toll at the turnpike. You've seen those walls that kind of close yourself in, and so it gives you that feeling that you have to slow down. We should do the same thing with the bike. So when you have a protected bike lane, and they do this in New York with the bike lanes, you have two different posts like this. Because you're biking, you're not going to go flying down in between those two poles because you feel like you're not going to be stable enough and might hit them. And so that's that's specifically been put in bike lanes on the waterfront in New York City to slow them down on the intersections where people are crossing the bike path. So if it's being done that for the bikes on the bike, so that they would slow down or stop for the pedestrians that are crossing the street, why not implement that also with the bikes? With the cars?
I almost feel like
I can go on about how I see cars all the time blowing through stop signs.
I agree.
You see it too. I've seen you do the videos as well.
Everybody, I think all sides of modes of transportation are at fault. It's almost like we should get everybody, even pedestrians. How many times do you see a pedestrian not look and just assume that the car's going to stop? And they're not even at the corner yet.
Yeah.
So a car's going a 2-ton, my Tahoe weighs 2 tons, right? I'm going 25 miles per hour, which is illegal, even 20, right? I'm going down the street.
It should be 20, yeah.
You know how hard it is for me to come to a stop if I don't see you? Where all you have to do is stay there at the corner. I'm gone in 1.5 seconds.
Maybe they're trying to win a Darwin Award.
We need to almost put everyone in the classroom, this entire city, and teach everybody how to ride a bike safely, how to walk across the street safely, how to ride a scooter, how to ride a cycle,
how to drive,
and how to drive.
And that's the issue.
And everyone
right now,
we do inline skates while we're doing it. I'm not too good at that.
And everyone protects what they do. Right. So if you're a cyclist, you hate cars. If you drive cars, you don't like bikes.
I'm a pedestrian. I don't hate bicyclists. I don't hate cars.
I don't hate the scooters.
You hate scooters. I don't hate the scooters. I hate the scooters. All right.
And that's the thing is that we already have licensed program with the cars. People are going through and they have to take a test and they go through the education
that's a good point.
We still have people crashing into sidewalks and buildings.
You're going to have your random stuff though.
But that's exactly what's going on.
There have been a lot less teenagers that are underage driving other people's cars than there have been driving other people's cars.
Do you think in generalizations here, do you think there's a war on cars in Hoboken?
I don't think there's a war on cars in Hoboken.
Do you think that any part of the
and if it is, you gotta check out the facts. The cars are winning. I mean, if you have 70% of the street, then and you have parking garages and you have all this infrastructure, you can go. Your car can go on practically every street in Hoboken.
Yeah, but we used to have when I say war on cars,
and they only have 70. That's not winning.
The cars, the amount of over and aggressive enforcement for parking tickets in the city is a war on cars. The overextension and overspending of stuff like bump outs and taking away parking spots on the street because of Zipcar and because of corner spot, these extended bus lane zones on Washington Street above 8th, where you're eliminated probably 6 or 7 parking spots on every single corner. That's a war on cars, wouldn't you say?
So you know, I'm really happy that you guys invited me tonight because I feel like we all have different stories.
Right.
So you
Yeah,
have
clearly
you have.
I'm biased
For
to.
example, you have the story that, and this is your story. I'm not saying it's not true.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's your story that people are over aggressive giving out tickets to cars, right? But then on my end, I see a line of cars outside of Fiore's, double parked, blocking the bike lane the whole time whenever they're open, and then also in Piccolo's as well, and there's no tickets happening.
Totally.
So it's a combo, and then there's also the stories that comes from the chief of police. He's told me how like they're trying to make sure that if it's a resident, that if they have the phone number, they call the number so that they make sure that they don't give them a ticket, they give them the chance to move on.
No chance.
Listen, that's
No chance.
like I said.
I would love to believe that.
It's different stories that I've heard.
Those,
right? And stories that are mine that I've also seen, which is not the calling, but you know, I tell you, for example, a friend of mine came to visit in Hoboken, and I was like, "Did you party in the garage?" Because I always tell them there's a garage in Midtown next to the hospital. Park there. He didn't. He parked on the street. And then he messaged me like the next day, and he said, "Oh, I think they don't like New Yorkers. They ticketed me." And I said, "Could you let me know where exactly you parked?" And when I checked, it was in a residents-only parking area. And there's a sign there. So I'm like, there's literally a sign there that says, "This is residents-only parking. Your car will be towed." I'm like, be happy you got a ticket, man. You didn't get towed. So listen, I'm happy with some of the initiatives that you're bringing along, that you're saying, hey, how can we make it easier for people to find parking because that makes it more effective, more efficient. We were in the transition committee.
Yeah, the train I could bring that up.
I incorporated some of your ideas as well in terms of parking.
There were some wild examples, though, of this. I wouldn't say. I'm going to stop saying war on cars, but an overzealous ambition to get rid of cars in certain areas. For example, in that committee, that transition committee, there was an idea by one of the members to eliminate all the parking on Willow, both sides of the street, thousands of cars, and create a protected bike lane and a bus lane.
So this is what we call a bad idea, and I will not give up the term war on cars.
Thank you.
Because that's what it is.
Right? But like,
So,
this is something I was talking about.
90% of the streetscape,
I'm not lying.
70% being dominated by the dominant form of transportation that people have used. You end up making it, and you lost 20% for cars, just as an example. What ends up, and you increase the natural scarcity with an artificial scarcity of parking spots. What you end up doing, it's a regressive tax on lower income earners for being able to afford a car. And maybe some of them work in the city, but like half of our town works elsewhere in New Jersey, and they need their cars.
The majority of people
we're talking about making people's lives more expensive, and maybe for the upper middle and the upper class, they can bite the bullet. They can afford the ticket. They can afford the extra couple of hundred shekels a month for the parking space. But you can't have everything you want.
It affects our overall.
So first of all, it wasn't both sides of parking, by the way. It was one side that was proposed. And on Clinton Street, actually, the street is so wide that it wouldn't have taken parking in most of the street. And so it was Clinton and Willow, the proposal from one of the community people in our decision team. Now, you mentioned the majority of people actually use mass transit in order to move around, in order to go to work. And he's not saying. And again, that's one street. You're not taking 90% or 80% of the street, but you're making it more equitable because you have buses. Literally, the 126 bus is one of the top 7 lines for anti-transit in the state.
Mm-hmm.
That one is one of them. The other one is 87.
One of the most expensive per mile, which goes back to these things that we do.
But why is it so expensive?
Regressive taxes.
But why is it so expensive? What do you mean? Expensive to the taxpayers or expensive as a passenger?
No, per mile, it's one of the highest fares.
It's one of the highest fares.
Yeah.
Yes, and here's the thing that has to do with also how we allocate funds for energy transit. But when we think about I think it's the 375, the 350, I think the fare from the 126 to Port Authority. But basically, that one would be cheaper than taking the car and going into the tunnel and going into Manhattan. But also, it helps so that you don't get. If the idea, the concept of a busway is for the mass transit which carries the most amount of people, not to hit traffic.
No, I get it.
And that's something that's been done, for example, in New York. And I know we're not New York. I mean,
well,
I'm here.
That's what you're getting.
14th Street right now. They made it into a busway. It's so efficient, the buses right now, that they had to slow down in order to just stay with the schedule. Like that's how much better. It's basically saying that with the cost effectiveness of the bus, you're going and you have the same reliability as the train. The PATH train loses about $100 million a year in subsidies. The busways, you can have the same reliability without having that loss. So that from the tax preservation, you want more of that instead of the train.
I think a lot of the times with these transportation ideas is we try to look at what works in other cities, and it's not just in transportation, it's also with parking ideas and parks. We're constantly going, oh, well, it works in Austin, oh, it works in Red Bank, New Jersey, or Montclair, it's going to work here. This is a very unique city, right? It's only a mile long, our streets are narrow. We would love to put in protected bike lanes on Flint, but what we're seeing is the fire department has come out and said it doesn't work, they're not wide enough. Right?
Already?
They said that they came out with a study. We brought this up 2 weeks ago.
It was after that community meeting that we were both.
Which was a disaster, I heard. Right? It wasn't.
Yeah, it wasn't well managed. Yeah.
Right, it wasn't well managed, and the anti for protected bike lane surpassed the pros.
There was also many people that were even from Bike Hoboken that they didn't want to speak. They literally told me I didn't want to get yelled at. So the format of that meeting didn't allow even for people from Bike Hoboken to speak.
Well, I mean, I think
were you there?
Characterization of the meeting, because there were plenty of people that spoke their minds and had no problem articulating their position one way or the other. I'm sure you floated around afterwards talking to people. The general mood of the roughly, what was it, like 65 to 67 people there?
No, that was 65 people. That was not 65 people. In Wallace?
Yeah, in Wallace.
That was not 65
downstairs in the cafeteria?
That was not 65 people.
I counted numerous times.
65 people?
Yes. There were people that were coming in and out.
Can we agree on 50? Are you good with 50?
Do we agree on 55? Do we agree on 55? Do we have 56? Do we have 45? Do we have 46? Do we have 46? Do we have 47? For the record, we're agreeing that there was at least 47 people there, okay?
But the majority were not in favor of bike lanes.
Yeah, and
Were you agree with that?
Yeah, the majority were in favor. So, and then...
Now, what's the reason there, though? Is that because Bike Hoboken didn't have enough people come out?
One is education, right? And talking about the facts of what happens with a protected bike lane. The other one, there was even a guy that was talking about stop signs there. Did you hear that guy? The guy was talking about protected bike lanes.
There was also several bicyclists that said, I don't feel safe in protected bike lanes because if there's going to be a car that's going to be a jerk or intoxicated, I can't get out of the way if I have those bollards there, whatever they're called.
Right.
And there was that woman that talked about that, and there was one or two other people
that one was for 11th Street,
that were bicyclists that were talking about
that. Is that a fair assessment?
And I don't think so, because those bollards were going to be right where the current bike lane is on 11th Street. You know where the
yes.
What would you call the center?
The garden.
The garden right in the middle.
Yeah.
So it's there. So
Why
right now
don't
there's
they get rid of the garden and put a bike lane in?
I'm sorry?
Why don't they get rid of the garden and move everything over? Then you have a protected bike lane.
Because you already have the space for. So right now there's no parked cars there.
Right.
And then it's basically just the bike lane that's right there right now. Just put bollards in it so that it's a little bit safer. There can actually be more dividers on the bottom that won't allow the car to just step in.
So that's your assertion. That's not necessarily a fact. Her assertion was that whether it was the vertical bollards or the other like plastic or rubber thing that you're talking about, it's like 6 inches up, that it would not allow her to get out of the way if someone was being a jerk, or was intoxicated, or otherwise inebriated, or otherwise driving dangerously. Whereas, as a bicyclist that's comfortable on the street, she would rather have the option of getting out of the way safely, or as safely as possible, than being, trapped in something. She didn't use the term, but she painted a picture of a potential death trap.
For that one, I mean, I would love to talk to her, but I wasn't able to at that moment. But if a car comes at you, you could literally just step into the garden, because that's like the same thing as a sidewalk. So the fact that it would be
magically
wrapped,
the car will stop. The car will stop.
I mean,
right?
you are in between the curb and the street. So there's the bollards. That's at the least you could do in order to protect them. What happens if there's no bollards and then the car goes in, as it would happen right now, is that you would be even in the same position. So that's just the minimum that can be done in order to protect
someone driving like a Looney Tune. You have the option of maneuvering your vehicle, because presumably, if you're riding in the street as a bicyclist, and I've never ridden in the street as a bicyclist, I haven't ridden a bicycle.
We should go out on a bike. I'll get you the helmet. We'll be good.
Knee pads, elbow pads.
I don't know about that.
George is brighter. All right.
Halloween costume.
Those like Punky Brewster, like apples coming from it. Great show, right? We can agree on that.
All right. I saw it in Spanish. I was in Ecuador.
The data shows that it's a good thing. Right? It's just a matter of education, right? It's just a matter of everything.
You're educating Edgar right now.
All right, like great show. Anyway, where were we?
You're gonna go on a bike ride.
I think if you look at overall our city of Hoboken, the economy of Hoboken, right? People are not biking into Hoboken from as visitors. Can we agree on that?
That's your opinion.
How are we going? They're going down the turnpike?
I literally see city bikes. Where do city bikes come from? City bikes coming in from Jersey City, going into Hoboken.
Going
through Jackson Street, going through Washington Street.
You can walk here. You can walk. You can run from Jersey City. I'm talking about outside of Hudson County.
Some people drive from Jersey City to Hoboken. I have family in Jersey City.
So I'm saying outside of Hudson County.
I'm saying there's a. But
we want people. We need our businesses.
But you're saying, and so. We need people to come into Hoboken.
We agree on that.
So what happens if we increase the number of people that drive into Hoboken?
That's what we want.
Traffic jams, right?
Or we're going to have a problem.
That's what
we need to work on. We need to work on
people get upset because they're like, man, so many people from outside Hoboken drive in, and then I can't get into Hoboken because we only have very specific ways in.
So I think you both have unrealistic expectations. I think your expectations are more tethered to reality. I think I've described you as a bicycle supremacist before. So
never.
All right, fine. I have publicly described you as a bicycle supremacist.
Now,
here. Okay.
But my whole thesis with this administration is that they and you ask our businesses why they're suffering, and they are suffering. With storefronts closing. You go down Washington Street, Dubliner just closed. I mean, even by the path, businesses are closing, right? Our restaurants are not doing as well as they can. People are moving outside of Hoboken. And some of those reasons based on our cars and parking. Parking in Hoboken, to me, is like the front porch of a house, right? It's the first experience you get coming to the city. And if you come to the city and that first experience is a ticket for being a little in the yellow, or you get towed and you have no idea where your car is, or you have to spend 45 minutes driving around, you don't want to come back to Hoboken, right? It's like the front porch being broke. And this is all micro, but then leads to the macro of that our economy is suffering. And it comes down to this administration not understanding these little things, these micro problems, but instead working on bump outs, working on plastic banning plastic bags. All these, at least in my opinion, insignificant things that are not solving our core problems that are introducing scooters, which opened up a whole nother can of worms. So like that's my whole thesis. Has nothing to do with I don't like bikes. I love bikes. Has nothing to do with I'm a pro car because my wife and I both use our cars for work. Right? It's more about what's the economy and what are the problems and how do we provide solutions.
Yeah,
that's my big one. On Washington Street, all those businesses that I've been talking to, right? Those extended bus lane zones, concrete, which by state of New Jersey DOT, it's supposed to be 70 feet is what a bus lane extended zone is. Concrete, the bus is supposed to pull in, which it doesn't, right? It still parks in the middle of the street, people go in the street.
Many times it doesn't because it's used by cars too.
Right, whatever the case.
And it parks in the middle of the street also because the bump outs make it difficult for them
to get around.
And that's my solution for that would be to, and that has been done also in other cities, is to have the platform for the buses be so that the bus stops on the actual like roadway, the traffic way, and so that people can get in and off without the bus having to pull in and then pull out again with the traffic. So
I just think we're sacrificing our overall economic strength for our local businesses, right, for a lot of things that may or may not increase or decrease our safety.
Every parent and that I've spoken to, besides you, right now that we've spoken, you don't see the benefit of the bump outs. But when I've spoken to the parents in Hoboken from the different groups, they all like the bump outs on Washington Street. They feel safer, and I feel safer.
Everyone that I know doesn't mean it's right. Everyone that I know that I've talked to,
because if you talk to a business,
agrees with me.
If you talk to every business owner,
it's not an argument.
There's parents that are gonna love it. It's like all the parts.
And you're saying no, you say.
Right?
So how is it that we get more business into Washington Street? It's by people walking through Washington Street. It's like having a mall, right? Is you go to the mall because you can walk from store to store. You don't go to the mall because you have a parking garage.
The curtain is revealed. You want to turn Washington Street into a car-free pedestrian zone.
I didn't say that.
You just said. No. You just talked about.
I said you have to.
Pedestrian mall.
I said
we don't want to keep up on our guests.
I did not.
We can go on.
You are. And I'm okay with that. You did say pedestrian. No. I said, why do people go to a mall? And it's because people can't walk safely. So if we make it safely for people to walk through Hoboken, through Washington Street, I did not say that.
You pointed out, people have been walking to stores in Hoboken for hundreds of years. Okay.
So you're not. So nothing should change.
85.
So nothing should change in Hoboken.
No, things can change, but we should change only when you're like. I agree with that. He said all joking aside, he set me up for that, right? Again, I said it before, it shouldn't be the role of whether it's the special interest group or the people that reside in City Hall to make the lives of people that live in the city more difficult. And when we do all these measures, which I think sound, really, really nice, what we end up doing is making the cost of living in town more expensive, and that it is. When there's a scarcity of parking, and you increase that scarcity through artificial means, all right, and you make it more difficult for people to drive, more likely for them to get tickets. It's a regressive tax. On the lower end of the economic spectrum. And what ends up happening is you're going to end up replacing the people on the lower end of our economic spectrum in Hoboken that have cars that can't afford the regressive, essentially, taxation with people that can. So you're just going to get a bougier town.
The scarcity of parking in Hoboken has been happening since 20 years ago when I got to Hoboken.
Yes. And I'm not saying
but if it's already here, you're not making it worse. You have to, and you have the pedestrian safety issue. That is an issue. Can we recognize that it's an issue, pedestrian safety? And so if we're making it safer for people, we are improving the quality of life for people. Now, when you say that we're making it more expensive, we're not making it more expensive because we have bump outs or because or because there's a scarcity of parking.
No, but the cost of Washington Street was $20 million. Without the bump outs, it would have been 12.
But what we're talking about is so the bump outs are the ones that cost the highest.
The rain gardens and the bump outs, all that cement and all the digging and everything.
It wasn't the water main that had difficulties and that was the biggest.
Yeah, that was bump out.
And also the conversation about saying that just because of parking, because of scarcity of parking, things are getting more expensive. That is not the issue. Is that we're in a very popular town that a lot of people want to move in, and that we don't have enough units, and also that we live in it just to the market rate. That's why I'm proposing community land.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Because I know maybe you feel like you're getting double teamed right now, and
handling it all.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks. That we really enjoy from this past week. Somewhere you visited, something that people might not know about that you want to shed light
on. So I always have, I like to have brunch at the Stewed Cow. It's on 4th and Adams.
Interesting.
A very, very great spot.
You live over there, right?
And I live a block away. So I've been going for years.
On the weekends, not...
On the weekends, yeah.
Do you ride the mechanical bull?
I did once, actually. It was a friend's birthday, and one of the guys from high school, we all played soccer together. And one of the guys was like, already signed us up for the bull. I'm like, let's do it. So, yeah, I have.
Josh, what do you got?
I suck, though. I was
hard. I did it when I first opened up. It's not easy. They go a lot easier on the women wearing skimpy clothing for some reason. I don't get it. But I'd say my restaurant that I appreciate is Satai. It's a Malaysian joint, but they're ethnic Chinese from Malaysia. They're not Malays, and they have a good Chinese menu. Their sesame chicken's off the chain. Also,
it could close next week.
God forbid.
He gave the first week. He gave the same thing about a restaurant in Washington, and it literally closed the next week.
Yeah,
so his curse is unbelievable.
It's really, really, really good.
I gotta go soon before they close.
You better try it out before Josh is
But at Satai, it's the only place that I tried to go, and that I really like it.
I will go with my staple, Rosario's Pizza. It's not on a lot of people's map when you say favorite pizza in Hoboken.
It's my
What's your favorite pizza? Rosario's? Very good. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
What's yours?
I like, okay. So the best pizza in town is at Tony's Bakery on Wednesdays. The Sicilian pizza. It's got, on the corner of 2nd and
Never done that.
It's also called Lusardo's. So Lusardo Brothers, Tony's Bakery. So one of the brothers is named Tony. He started it, and then the other brothers joined it. It really bothers me that they have two names because, it's just confusing to talk about a place like that, right? But it's really, really good. My second favorite is Tudino's, just like Rosario's. Good, solid Albanian people.
Cool.
Yeah, I've known Rosario's pizza since I was in high school, so. They have.
I love the owners, good guys, Tim and John.
Chicken buffalo.
The whole family's in there.
Yeah.
The missus makes their sauce. She does right. They're always good pizza, good pasta dishes, good family-owned business. Definitely try it out. If you're interested to come on the show, hopefully, shoot us a DM, shoot us your questions. We're starting to build this out. This is our fourth episode. Yeah, this is our 4th episode. And we're rocking and rolling. So we're excited to hear from you. Send us comments, what you think, what you don't like, what you want to see.